Okay, I am back. 1 Samuel chapter 16. This is where David gets anointed as king. Here we go. Now the Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons." I found that interesting language, like with Abraham and Isaac, he says, God will provide himself a sacrifice, right? Here, I have provided myself a king among his sons, and he has in both cases. So, anyway, back to that. And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me." So they do it secretly, okay? But the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I name to you." So Samuel did what the Lord said and went to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, "Do you come peaceably?" And he said, "Peaceably, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. So it was, when they came, that he looked at Eliab and said, "Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So that seems to be a whole lesson with this Saul thing, he's still thinking like that, and God has another plan. So Jesse called Abinadab and makes him pass before Samuel. And he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen these." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all the young men here?" Then he said, "Well, there remains yet the youngest, and there he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here." So they sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy with bright eyes and good looking, and the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah. Okay, so they did this kind of secretly, but they knew what was going on, and David was anointed as the future king. Only, again, he won't reign yet until later. I mentioned that in the last video, so if you just dropped in, watch the video before this one and it will make much more sense. Okay, now we get this thing, the distressing spirit that troubles Saul. Okay, but the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said to him, "Surely a distressing spirit from God is troubling you. Let our master now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp. And it shall be that he will play it with his hand when the distressing spirit from God is upon you, and you shall be well." So Saul said to his servants, "Provide me now a man who can play well, and bring him to me." Then one of the servants answered and said, "Look, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him." So David had a lot of abilities. Therefore Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them by his son David to Saul. So David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Please let David stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. And so it was, whenever the Spirit from God was upon Saul, that David would take a harp and play it with his hand. Then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit would depart from him. Okay, so we have that. Now in 17, and he's still a pretty young man here, David, we get the story of David and Goliath, and this all just leads up to it. It's kind of long, so I have a certain part I'll read. Here, 40. From 40 on, we have this. So David takes off the armor because it's too heavy and he hasn't tested it. So he goes bare, okay? Well, he's clothed, but not with this armor. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. This is the giant Goliath, okay? So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And that's when it's like, uh-oh, now it's on, right? And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So it was, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So it's kind of like it was like a bullet, okay, that hit him right between the eyes. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of its sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell among the road to Sharaim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. Then Saul saw David going out against the Philistine. When Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your soul lives, O king, I do not know. So he must have grown somewhat and changed, and Saul didn't recognize him. Anyway, so the king said, Inquire whose son this young man is. Then, as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? So David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. Okay, so now here, let me see, we're at 10. Yeah, okay. All right. 10, 18. Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it had happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul doesn't end up taking a liking to the song. So then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him, and he said, They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day forward. So he had it out for him from this time on. Jealousy, And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hand, as at other times, but there was a spear in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the spear, for he said, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. Like with the armies at war, he was in the head of it. He wasn't hiding in somewhere else. So they really, admired him. Okay, first wife, here we go. Then Saul said to David, Here is my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, Let my hand not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. So he's planning on sending him to war, so he'll die. See, envy. So David said to Saul, Who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it happened at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Meholathite as a wife. So I don't know what happened and why, but now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul said, I will give her to him, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, You shall be my son-in-law today. And Saul commanded his servants, communicate with David secretly and say, look, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now, therefore, become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants spoke those words in the hearing of David. And David said, does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing I am a poor and lightly esteemed man? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, in this manner David spoke. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king does not desire any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to take vengeance on the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to become the king's son-in-law. Now the days had not expired, therefore David arose and went, he and his men, and killed 200 men of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full count to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, as a wife. And this time being expired, like they had a year they had to wait, and in the meantime David did this. Thus Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter loved him. And Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went out to war. And so it was, whenever they went out, that David behaved more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed. I think he was already esteemed. He was just being humble and all that. So anyway, but now he's even more esteemed. Okay, and then in 19, we see the beginning of this. I'll read this one, and then I'll do a lot of overview stuff, and then, okay, so 19. Now Saul spoke to Jonathan his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. So Jonathan told David, saying, my father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning, and stay in a secret place and hide, and I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe I will tell you. Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause? So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be killed. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines, and struck them with a mighty blow, and they fled from him. Now the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul, as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. And David was playing music with his hand. Then Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from Saul's presence, and he drove the spear into the wall. So David fled and escaped that night. So this was going on and on, back and forth, Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to kill him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, and put a cover of goat's hair for his head, and covered it with clothes. So when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. Then Saul sent the messengers back to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him. And when the messengers had come in, there was the image in the bed with a cover of goat's hair for his head. Then Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this and sent my enemy away so that he has escaped?" If I were her, I'd be like, he's my husband and I love him. Hello. I mean, these people, I don't know. And Michal answered Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" So she said this probably to save her own life. Like, well, he got away or he would have killed me. So David fled and escaped and went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naioth. Now it was told Saul, saying, "Take note, David is at Naioth in Ramah." Then Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the group of prophets prophesying and Samuel standing as leader over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. And when Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. Then Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. Then he also went to Ramah and came to the great well that is at Sechu. So he asked and said, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "Indeed, they are at Naioth in Ramah." So he went there to Naioth in Ramah. Then the Spirit of God was upon him also, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he also stripped off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they say, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" So this worked differently back then, not like it does today. It just kind of would come and go, even though Saul wasn't really chosen anymore. But anyway, that was what happened here. So they didn't get David. Okay, now in 20, it just goes on. David is endangered by Saul. Jonathan is, his loyal friend and helps him to not get caught. So he escapes all the time. In 21, so that's basically what goes on. There's a lot of cat and mouse, but that's what's happening. 21, you have David flees again. He eats the holy bread in the tabernacle. There's that story in there. And he takes the sword of what he had used before with the giant. It's in there. And they see him, and somebody sees him in there, a servant of Saul. So he tells Saul. So this whole cat and mouse goes on. Okay, now we have this thing, 22, let's see. Yeah, David escapes to this cave, and everybody is kind of assembled around David, is what happens here. Yeah, so he's still in hiding. And then we have this thing here where Saul, he ends up murdering all these priests. So I'll read that part because it's interesting. But okay, I'll come back to 22. Let me just finish what's happening here. So David is still in hiding this whole time. Okay, he's in hiding. He spares a city. He's still like helping Israel. Okay, and 24 is the thing where two times actually in 24 and in 26, David has a chance to eliminate Saul, and he spares his life because of that, not touching the Lord's anointed thing, which had to do with kings, okay, not pastors, kings, because we're all the Lord's anointed today. So, but he doesn't want to do it before the time. So he spares Saul's life. That's what that whole thing is about in 24. And I read this when I went over that video. Okay, so that's what is going on here. And then he proves it to Saul. I could have killed you, but I didn't. Saul acts like he'll take him back as a buddy again, and of course he doesn't. He's still trying to kill him. I mean, this goes on and on. It happens again in chapter 26. In 25, David acquires 2 more wives. He gets these other lovely ladies as wives. And it's an interesting story. I just don't want to read all the details. Here is where Saul is spared a second time in the same kind of way, for the same reason. David doesn't want to kill him, as he's still the anointed king. So his life gets spared again. '27, David flees again. He ends up being over with the Philistines for a while. Okay, then 28 I'll read separately because that's its own story. And then in 29, we have more battling between David and Philistines. Then, 30 is more battle. This time it's Amalekites, and they win. And then in 31, let me put it here, we have the tragic end of Saul and his sons. 31, Saul and his sons die in battle, and this was prophesied that this would happen, and we'll see that in 28, but that's what happens. So that's the end of Saul as king, and then David comes in as king, and that starts in 2 Samuel, which I'll do next time. But now I'll go and do these chapters here. I'll do 22. I just wanted to give you the overview of what happens with the history. Again, it's a lot of these kinds of back and forth hiding stories, cat and mouse, and I just don't want to read all that. You can read that. It's easy, but you'll see what happens. Anyway, 22. This is where he murders the priests. Okay, so I'll read this part, and then that'll be it for this video. Okay, so when Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered, now Saul was staying in Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah, with his spear in his hand, and all his servants standing about him. Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? All of you have conspired against me, and there is no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. There is not one of you who is sorry for me, or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me, to lie in wait as it is this day." I mean, I think he was a bit paranoid, honestly, but all right, because none of that was true. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, and said, "I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." See, that was that thing back there. And the servant saw it. So the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." Then Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me, to lie in wait as it is this day?" So Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding and is honorable in your house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant, or to any in the house of my father. For your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much." David had said something, that he was on a mission from Saul, which he wasn't, and the priest didn't know that. How can he know? So Saul is mad, and he's like, "Well, I didn't know about that he said that, and it wasn't true." And the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." Then the king said to the guards who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me." Can you imagine? But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, "You turn and kill the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priests and killed on that day 85 men who wore a linen ephod. Wow. Also Nod, the city of the priest, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep with the edge of the sword. So this was Saul ordering his servants to do this against his own people in Israel. Can you imagine? And kill all these 85 priests who did nothing wrong. Wow. Anyway, so he was getting worse and worse. This could be a type of things in the end times too, But anyway, now one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priests. So David said to Abiathar, "I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, 'I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not fear, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, but with me you shall be safe.'" Okay, so wow, amazing. Anyway, so that's the deal. Now I will read 28 separately because that's its own thing in an interesting way. Okay, I'll be back in a bit.